Hi, everybody. My name is Christy Craig. I am the publisher at Hidden Timber Books. We're a small press in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I want to welcome you to another one of our small press author reading events. This has been a really fun series to bring in other authors from small presses all over the country and introduce readers to poets, to novelists, to memoirists, and short story writers. And if you're interested in seeing the people who have been on our series in the past, you can go to the Hidden Timber Books YouTube channel, and all of the recordings there are there, and you can fly through them as much as you want to. There's some really great authors that we've had, and it's been a lot of fun. So one thing that I've done in the past with these readings real quickly is just introduce you to another small press quickly with a book that I've seen or have that's really pretty cool. And this is a book from Raven Chronicles. They are a small press out west, and they have run a literary journal for a while, and they've published this anthology, Take a Stand, Art Against Hate. It is a beautiful, beautiful book. It's full of poems, essays, images, and if you're interested in supporting a small press and artists in that way, this would be a wonderful book to check out. So I just wanted to mention that briefly. And to welcome Cynthia McCain today to share her poetry and to talk about her work as a writer. Just to give you a little bit of information, Cynthia McCain worked as a forest ecologist in the Pacific Northwest. Her work as a poet came later, and she has poems published in Blue Heron Review, Heart, The Rumpus, and more. The Dream of Falling is her second chapbook of poems. So, Cynthia, welcome, and let us know, should we call you Cynthia, Cindy, what would you prefer? And I look forward to hearing you read. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, call me Cindy. Cynthia is something only my mother and my physician have called me in the past, and I'm comfortable with Cindy. I am so jazzed to see you all here. This is great. I'm truly tickled. I would like to acknowledge Christy Craig here at Hidden Timbers for arranging these. One of my dear friends' dear friend was a reader and said, you know, this is something you should check out. And I'm so lucky to be able to do that. And I'd also like to express my appreciation to the small press that published my chapbook. This was put out by Finishing Line Press, and I think they did just a gorgeous job of it. So I really am indebted to them as well. So I thought I'd give just a really brief intro to why I like poems, why I like to write them, and what I tend to write about. But I think you can overtalk this stuff, so I'm going to mostly just read poems. I write very short poems, so there will be a lot of breaks in between the poems so that you don't feel like you've just been out in a hailstorm. I started writing poems, gosh, it's been over 10 years now. I had a brush with cancer, and there was this wonderful series of art workshops for people who were going through that experience, and one of them was writing. And I just remember being exhilarated on the other side of it and wanting to do more. And the more I did, the more I just felt like I had found my spot. I'd been reading for my entire life, but I had never dared write. And it's a whole different thing. And it's something that I personally find a lot of fun. Now, some people write to express deep emotions. Some people write to call people to action. And I write because I like to, because it is a way to rummage around in my head and come up with things that I didn't know fit together, a way to deal with difficult emotions in a way that is, it's kind of a revelation to me too. And I really like words. I just really like words. So when you find yourself in the right place at the right time, sometimes you just luck out. And I feel like that's how it was when I ran into poetry. I have been an ecologist for a really long time, and that really is how I approach the world. I see everything as being connected. And another thing that I loved in ecology and in writing is the way two things, when you put them next to each other, when you juxtapose them, there's this jolt. And for a moment, you're awake and aware. And there's something in that that is very important to me. So I'm hoping sometimes in today you get this little jolt, and that's it. That's what I want. So I thought I'd start out by reading one of my comfort poems. This is a poem that was one that I wrote a while back, and every time I hear a chickadee, it makes me feel like this. So I'm going to start out with Chestnut-backed chickadee. Because I can name them, I think that I know them, but I don't know where they'll sleep tonight. Is the leader of their flock a male, strong and dour, or a female, certain and impatient? Are chickadees ever alone? In winter, they join with nuthatches, creepers, kinglets, a tiny festival touring the trees together. Why? Because I can hear them, I feel at home here, but I don't know what that familiar sounds means. There's that call and a gurgle. This is mine, this is ours. If a jay comes too close, a cloud of birdlets cage it in a cacophony of D's. Now, this I have never seen, but it's in the books. In spring, in a cavity hollowed into a rotten tree, the chickadees tuck a home-woven fur comforter over their handful of nut-sized eggs. How much of the natural history we learn is true, and how much do we take on faith? And what is there to hear that no one knows to listen for? One of the places that I've gone for many years in a row is a center in this part of the Coast Range that is, the Coast Range is a wonderful, fecund, green place that thrives because it gets a lot of rain. And in the spring, it typically rains. And I've gone to the retreat center for the Spring Creek Project many springs in a row. It almost always is wet, and it's wonderful. One time I went and I looked out my window and there was this huge big leaf maple. And that's what this is about. It's called Maple Coast Range Spring. And it's dedicated to Guanyin, who is the symbol of compassion. Guanyin, dressed in green, quiet and barefoot in the blackberry tangle, 1,000 soft round arms. Tears drip from the tips of each twig, each finger reaching out past the slow growing moss. Give me that open-handed heart to accept the rain. Get ideas to write from any number of weird places, and I find the internet to be great for that. The weirdest factoids come popping out at you. I remember, I love thinking about hippos. I've written, I don't know, 4 or 5 hippo poems, and I've spent time looking at various things about hippos on the internet. Did you know that hippos actually don't swim? I didn't know that. They run across river bottoms. And another thing, another factoid I found out from the internet is that polar bears evolved from browner bears. Now they're white, but they didn't always look the same way that they do now. But somehow that ended up in this poem called The Color of Ice. In the Arctic, in the farthest North Arctic, where latitude and longitude converge, the land is made of water. The rocks and ridges and shadows are water. The world is warming, pushing polar bears off the polar ice into towns and on back porches and alleys where too much is soft. Once the bears were the color of earth, now the color of ice. Soon they will be the color of air. One of the times I was in the Coast Range cabin at Shotpouch Creek, I was spending a weekend trying to sort of map out the difference between prayers and poems. And this one was part of a series which I think is a poem and not a prayer. It's called Morning Poem 1. I open the box that is my heart, empty it on the ground, kneel down, pick up what I will need for this day. So sometimes I actually just write about real life. I hardly write any fiction. I'll tell you when I do. But this piece and the next few are mostly just from just life as we lived. And some of you in the corner in my gallery view will relate to this. It's called X-Rated. My daughter texts, she needs something she left behind in her dresser when she left for school. She needs her sports bra and some undies and posters for her wall. I take the list to her empty room. Sports bra, check. One of mine she needed in a rush a couple of years ago already. Undies. I pull out these butterflies, these posies, these secrets that Victoria whispered into a flicking ear. Striped sailors, polka dots, gold lame, leopard spots, black lace, nylon, cotton, a thong. I never gave her those. All I ever gave her was the second X. So I seal them in a leftover bubble mailer and put her East Coast address in 2 places just to make sure she gets what she needs. But she should buy new posters. She's outgrown these. So one thing I have noticed in readings is that if you write really short poems, that you need a lot of variety. So I have asked Christy if she would read the next poem on book clubs. Now, for my sins, I belong currently not to just one book club, but to 2 book clubs. But I've learned a lot from the people I've been in book clubs with, and may you all be able to enjoy that as well. Christy, you ready?
I'm ready. In listening to you read your poetry, Cindy, I can see it's so important to slow down. And take in every word and every stanza and every phrase. So I hope I can do justice to this poem. It's a really cool one that I like. Book club. Ladies at book club, careful not to say what no one wants to hear. Ladies at book club, startled to find out how very different we are. Ladies at book club, having opinions all woven together, like making a basket. We earn badges in gentility, cancer, and elder care. We earn badges in association.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I wondered, maybe we can talk just a minute about this poem as well as the others that you just read. When I met with Cindy before the reading to just kind of go over logistics and things like that, and then I sent her a little list of some of my favorite poems from the chat book, and one of them is book club. And it really speaks to the connections that we make with each other, and just discovering those deeper connections with people you wouldn't assume that you would have any sort of tie to. Maybe, I mean, book clubs certainly bring us together in a way that we all appreciate the same kind of reading. But even so, and your poem speaks to that, there are certain things you don't talk about in book club, that you don't want to break those ties that you're building. So it really just speaks to that idea of fostering a strong community in one way or another. I just wondered how you are maintaining those connections, or how we can maintain those connections as we still continue to be very much a society that's online.
I see some of my book club people right here, and this is how we're doing it. We're doing it on Zoom. And as Martha can testify, one of the things that holds people together is not only being able to talk about ideas, books, themes, authors, but a lot of it is just coming together and sharing some really good food and some not bad wine either. So being able just to check in and see how people are holding up. We've had grandchildren born. We've had health crises survived. We've had a member who we're all concerned about because we're not sure what her health really is and we can't map out where to go from here. I mean, just keeping those connections are really, really important. Although here's another thing about book clubs. My daughter, who is in this group, and I were part of a mother-daughter book club from the time like 3rd grade through 12th grade. It was 3rd grade, right, Eva? And not long ago on Zoom, we got together to check in to see how all of our people were doing, because after that amount of time and that many years watching these girls grow up, you not only know them pretty well, you care about them immensely. And it was amazing what we all remembered from the books that we had read from all those years before. So that was, Zoom is not all bad, because we wouldn't have been able to pull that off without Zoom. And were we not in the middle of virus, we wouldn't have occurred. I don't think I'm the only one that reached out more to people that I hadn't talked to for a long time during the coronavirus, because suddenly I remembered how important they are to me. And so the Mother-Daughter Book Club was an example of that, just as the other book clubs that are more current. I mean, admittedly, the girls who are all just turning 30, they don't have silver hair like most of the women in my other book club, but man, it's great to be able to see them. So, we complain about Zoom. It's not all bad. Is that okay?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when I initially started this small press reading series, I did it because COVID came about and people's book tours were being canceled. And I thought, there's this platform, why not try to use it and see what happens? And it has really turned out to be a really fun, wonderful way to meet people that I would not be able to really see in, what might have been a normal time a year or two ago, because it's difficult for me to travel certain places, or not every poet is able to come to Milwaukee and read, and I can't always get out to Oregon. So it's turned out to be, like you said, sort of a silver lining in where we are with the way our world is working right now. So I totally agree with you. It's really nice to see faces and not just be emailing all the time or even just on the phone. So I do want to open it up. If there are people who would like to ask a question, you can let me know in the chat, or if you want to just wave and unmute your mic and maybe say a comment or anything about some of the poems. I know a few people have made comments in the chat box. Patty, you can go ahead. I see your hand up.
Yes, well, I'm not someone who's known Cindy since she was in 3rd grade or 8th grade, but since our first traumatic year in college. And what I found listening to your poems is they really work read out loud. I mean, they just slowly, deliberately, they come through. I'm crying as you're reading them, and I'd read them all before. So this is really a learning for me, and I'm just so proud that you're doing this work.
Hopefully you'll hear one that you haven't read so far, but we'll find.
Fair enough.
And Shirley, I see you've got a question. Okay, Shirley's just asking, have you written any haiku?
I have, and I'll read one. I see that Alice is also on the call. One of the, I guess it was the last time we were at the cabin in the Coast Range, a good friend of my friend died. And It was during Easter. And those 2 days were just suffused with a sense of loss, and yet being in nature where everything was being renewed. It was the essence of that. And somehow we got to writing haiku. I think it was Alice's idea, but haiku is beautiful. And actually, I was going to say, if somebody asked me what my favorite poems were, that's what I would say. And I almost always have to have them explained to me, but once they are, they're such marvels. So the haiku for a death, it's in Woman and Horse. And I'll just read them. There was a set of 3 haiku. How far have you gone, washed in this fine spring rain? Have you reached the creek? Rain on bleeding heart, a single drop on a leaf, shining beside the soft path. Beyond the window, the grass in the orchards. There are no footprints. I'm terrible at limericks, I will say. So the next poem is called Cultural Immersion, and it's from when I was in China. I spent 1984 in China as a graduate student on an exchange there with the Northeast China Forestry University. And it's called cultural immersion because you notice that culture shock is not, it's not a thing these days. People don't talk about it. But I found it to be real. And it was something that I have thought about many times in the time since then. So cultural immersion, 1. It's not that I feel guilty. I took off the slip covers. I cried in public. I didn't want to sing at the party. I didn't give enough gifts. I asked for my first name. When she took my arm crossing the street, when they pushed me squeezing into the bus, when I missed the train, the crowd swarming like bees, bones on the restaurant table. 2. It was a coal city in Heilongjiang. There was a 2-story brick tower not far from the foreigners' hostel that may have been for power, hot water, a boiler maybe, I don't know. I grew up in California. We bought electricity pre-wrapped in plastic at Safeway. There were white cotton slipcovers on the flesh-colored chairs in the foreigners' hostel. One more layer between me and the world. I uncovered the desk chair in the name of freedom and claustrophobia. By the end of the year, the chair was gray. 3. We are cultured like pearls. I've told people that I joined the ACLU after I got back from China, but I find that the ACLU thinks I joined in 1983. I will honor their record keeping, but I've re-upped ever since. Never know how your world will be expanded. This next poem, Disclosure, was published by Rumpus. They have a series that started with the Me Too movement. And I had a poem that I thought would fit. There are poems that express what is hard to hear and poems that express what is hard to say. And this is called Disclosure. In my family, giving knives is bad luck. Knives cut connections, blood the knife, or give to lose. Opinels are camping knives, single-bladed French folding knives, very sharp. Last Christmas, we each got our own Opinel. Mine was blue, its wooden handle an innocent indigo. I don't know what to do with mine. I keep it somewhere safe in case I go camping alone and need it, but I don't go camping alone. Well, except there was one time when I was in my 20s, my one-eyed dog and I started up a trail only to be driven back by the opening day of hunting season. The first time I ever spent the night by myself was in the apartment, and the guy in the brown ski mask climbed in the unlocked window in the dead hours. His knife, I don't remember clearly, but I think it was a silver clasp knife. So I don't know what to do with this knife. Hidden in the far left corner of the top drawer of my dresser, behind the panties and the camisoles beside the cotton handkerchiefs. I keep it where I hide gifts before I give them, sure that no one would want to look in my underwear drawer, as though even the children would know there were some places no one would ever go. A folding knife among the intimates. So for a quick change of pace, are you ready for a change of pace? I wanted to read one of the hippo poems. It's called Mutant Hippos of the Limpopo. One hippopotamus, round, brown, nubbly bobbing basketball body, mouth wide, wider than that, two marshmallow teeth between fluted tusks, baby bear ears peeping up on top. Two hippopotami, backs, necks breaking the surface, territorial, nocturnal, exuding blood, sweat, swimming in the rivers. Three hippopotami, four, many hippopotami, all in the river in the Limpopo. A flotilla in the waters of Africa, eyes on the top of the water. One hippopotamus yawning. I actually like hippo poems, but that's the only one I'm going to read right now. The Blue Heron Review published a poem of mine called Tides, and this is an homage to Pablo Neruda's language. And when I think about being intoxicated by poetry, this is the feeling that I think of. Tides. Sail on currents of rich water by the isle of bitter pines. The roses beneath the waves from past climates of hope bloom for the fish, bloom for the pines. If the tides pull me out into the water under the waves, I will pick a flower from before and tie it to your anchor. Your ship must be in some sea above brittle coral reefs, in wind without the scent of trees. So the title poem, From a Dream of Falling, is very short. It's sort of in the middle of the chapbook. I'll talk about it after I read it. The Dream of Falling. There was a flower, and just for a moment, the flower was only part of a plant, a device for pollination, bare of the exact glamour of beauty, exposed to the adequate light of desolation. That was a jolt. And actually, it was the only poem that I've ever worked on a translation with. I do not speak French, but I had some folks from Quebec who were willing to translate it for me, but we got to bare of the exact glamour of beauty, and they said, how do you want us to translate that? And I said, well, does it have the same two meanings in French as it does in English? And they said, no. And I'm like, how do I choose which meaning? How do you do that in translation? Do you do it? And I made a choice, but I feel like I gave away half my twins, you know. It was amazing. So translation, I mean, I had known that, but ever since then, I look particularly at translations from the Chinese or the Japanese, and I go, that's what we think it says. Not really. So I'm going to read one, then we're going to take a little break again for questions. This one, you know, in poetry, you can write about love a lot easier than talking about it. You can write about loss. And loss is something that people have such a hard time talking about. But this was as my mother lay dying. And it's called About Her Skin. It's still hard to read. About her skin, the way you can see through it, what you can see through her skin, the blood under her skin, the color of the blood, that purple, red, brown star of blood on the back of her hand, the way the veins show through, as though only the poverty blood, lighten of its load of oxygen, belongs in her now. The way the wrist looks ornamental, not for everyday use. The way my skin looks beside hers, her hand on my right hand, two different organs, hers a window, mine a wall. Her body is sublimating. Where did her skin go? I take a picture like an X-ray, like the MRI, like those images that have brought her here, transparent and transient. So I could use a break after that one. How about some questions?
That's a beautiful poem, Cindy. And I know other people have mentioned it in the chat, but the haikus are really beautiful too. I know Laura had a question before, and I want to make sure she has an opportunity to ask that now.
Thanks. I have to stop crying first, though. Thank you, Cindy. These are beautiful. I think you mentioned being in book clubs, but I think you're also part of a poets group. How does that work? How do you take something that comes so deeply and take it to others? I'm curious.
Well, I think it's easiest when you know and you trust the people that you're reading with. You're going to trust that when they give you feedback, it will be helpful things like, yeah, I really don't think you needed that whole first stanza. Or it was so clunky. It was great up to the point where you know, so those things, you know, they're not going to challenge you on what you feel. But when you are reading it for the first time and you get to hear it and they get to hear it and they give you feedback on it, what poetry is really, it is oral. And so having somebody you trust to give you that kind of feedback is, it's precious, I guess is what it is. Yeah. And I see people in my poetry group, so I know that they know what I mean. Yeah, I stuck my heart out, I guess, and I'm gonna do a little community ed Zoom class on poetry in the wintertime around Corvallis. But I said explicitly from the beginning, this is not a critique group, because, you know, when you're just starting out, you don't want to hear anything like you should throw out the whole first stanza. What you need to hear is like, wow, that is, yeah, more. That's what you need. So I hope that I can give them to them. Yeah, I don't know how people who write only for themselves, how they do that. I don't know. I see other experienced writers in here too. So, and another question?
Okay, Debbie, go ahead.
Cindy, what's the meaning of life?
42. So the next question, How about that next poem? So the next one is one that hasn't been published, and it's local for the Pacific Northwest. I mean, those of us who live in Oregon or Washington State will recognize the way that the winter looks. It's the rainy season out here when things come back to life. So this one, it's about winter solstice, and I am honored to say that it was commissioned by my neighborhood, that there's a tradition on winter solstice on the longest night where people gather in this one-room schoolhouse down the road, and then they go on a walk together that night and come back. And sometimes it's raining like hell and sometimes it's not. But I lucked out because the day that I read this one, well, the night, we walked out and it was a full moon and it was magic. So this is winter solstice. In the dusk before the long night, colors fade below the threshold, even the new green, though it holds on after the others have embraced the gray. In the darkening before the long night, the sky bows up above the ridge. If there are clouds, the clouds hold the last of the sun out beyond Yaquina Bay. If it is clear, the sky is wordless until the first star appears and the blue deepens into black. Now that it's dark, somewhere there's the sound of water. In our valley, fall fades as the last cottonwood's gold dies out. The wind wrestles in the firs. The oaks across the pasture are lit by lichens. The rain starts and the creek revives. In our valley, this time of year, the autumn reaches out to spring. The solstice is not the time of darkness, but the time the buds of the Indian plum start to swell. The next poem I would like to dedicate to Eleanor Berry, who is a poet who lives nearby, outside of the town of Salem. And Eleanor Berry once liked this poem, but she was one whose house was totally burned down during the great fires of 2020. And that's a big loss. But she is fine and presumably will be using this to write more poems. I don't know, but this is Our Constellation. It was published in Halfway Down the Stairs. The story starts once upon a time. There was the most beautiful woman over there, and she loved him over there. And then iron trouble found their tender-fingered knight. The broken sword lies between them. There's the hilt, there's the blade. Those are his eyes. Those are her tears glittering in the long dark. But stars are like facts. As we map them in their real places, they become unrelated and lonely, each one separated by long empty time. Even light gets old between them. They do not touch. The story is an accident of juxtaposition. Facts are like stars. This explanation, our constellation, hanging in space. Sometimes I read mostly nature poems, which are gentle, but this time around, I guess I was feeling different. So this one I haven't published. It's called Doll in Black. My sister refuses rights, refuses remains, leaves those to me alone. Number 1, doll. She's about 6 inches tall, this hand-stitched cloth doll I found on the banks of the Trinity River. She has wide open, white sequined eyes, someone's hair glued to the head, a stitch for a mouth. I brought the doll home and left some of my mother's ashes by the river. Did I leave sorrow or bring it home with me? If I burn this soft, dark puppet, what would happen in the fire? What would I free? Number 2, sister. At last, my sister consented to a ritual. She came with me to Salt Creek. We poured the rest of the ashes over the waterfall. My mother had never seen it. We stared at a rainbow at the foot of the falls together. 3, fire. Today, I burned the doll, the smoke from the wood stove white in the winter rain. It has been 7 years. My hands are dry and clean. So the last of this section is also from real life, but I bet some of you will be able to relate. It's called Late. The phone does not bring good news at 3 o'clock in the morning. We wrap up together, we who had been sleeping near the borders of the bed. 4 o'clock isn't good for much. It's too late or too early. Even worry is worn out by 4 o'clock. We fall asleep touching. Okay, a short nature poem, and then we get a movie. This one's also from Woman and Horse. In the sound of water, I hear the silence. In the sound of the wren, the water. I ask for the creek, you give me the rain. Moss, prayer flags hanging on the vine maple. In the rain, the creek. In the creek, the wren. In the wren, the water. Cue video? You guys ready for a movie? Doesn't take long.
All right, let me pull that up here.
Soulmates. There are, what, 7 billion people in the world now? If you're a soulmate, that 1 in a million, lock to your key, perfect fit, hasn't found you yet, do not, sweetheart, do not give up. 7 billion is 7,000 million. Therefore, my sweet, there are not 1, not 2, not 200, but 7,000 of them out there. 7,000 hearts that beat as one. In fact, a dime a dozen, a veritable Valentine's Day massacre. And so, at 6 degrees of separation, you certainly know someone who knows, and yet you don't. No one ever, no one I know. And maybe that's for the best.
That is a very cool animated poem. I love animated poems. And, it's people have already said it's really wonderful to hear you read your work. It brings it to life. And then to add that extra medium of seeing a video and hearing your voice and taking in the words, it just is really, really cool. Can you tell us a little bit about creating that video, or what inspired you to animate that poem versus another one?
Well, again, going back to Shot Pouch Creek, one time I went there with, you have to write up a little blurb on what you're going to do, you know. And so my blurb that year was, I'm going to learn how to use this stop motion app. And I did, and I made a little video. It's also on my website, which is about 30 seconds, and it's about a flower turning into a butterfly and flying away. So I knew I could do it. And I don't know why that one. Because they're fun. They are so fun. And I like doing little pictures. I mean, Woman and Horse, it has, the whole first part is an illustrated story, which I had thought I was going to make into a video, and it turned into a chapbook instead. You never know. But I still wanted to do a video, and so soulmates. That's why.
I think that's a testament to how the creativity process works sometimes. It's easy as a writer or an artist to get really serious about the work, and play is a huge part of fostering our creativity and just seeing where it goes and seeing how it unfolds. So, you know, I love hearing that you like to do your own, to do drawings and images and things like that. That's, I do that as well. I think that I took a writing class recently, and the first thing that we did was we had an artist who taught a class on drawing instead of just writing, and it was a really great experience to help visualize the story, but also just to remind us that, you know, there's so many avenues of creativity, and they all feed our soul, you know, even if they don't end up in a published book, or they don't, you know, we don't end up sharing them. It feeds that, it fosters that imagination just as well.
I think, let me recommend to raising a child who's an artist as another way to foster this. When I look around where I write, I've got things that my artist child has done that are continuing stimulation to me, and they really are fun. So she sent me a pop-up card one time, and it was like, pop-ups, have you done pop-ups? They're perfect for Zoom, because you can be cutting out pop-ups, and you know, you've got your glue stick. They don't know, right? Totally don't know that you're doing this. And at the end of it, you're like, thank you so much for your input. Yes, I totally agree with that. And I think we should vote for that motion. And you have like this pop-up of a queen waving a fan. You don't know. So yeah, try that one. That one's a lot of fun. I'm serious. Well, you know, pretty much.
That's awesome. Well, we have just a little over 5 minutes left. So I want to allow people to ask a question again, but I want to also, you know, allow Cindy to read one more poem if you'd like to. So does anybody have a question or a comment before we hand it back over to Cindy? Go ahead, Doug.
Well, I hesitate to make a comment because I'm not a writer. Well, I have written a lot in my life, but no creative writing ever. And I know this group is pretty accomplished in that regard. But Cindy, I just wanted to tell you, if I can tell you, what it means to hear your voice after all these years. Because I haven't seen you in over 50 years, and yet we grew up around the corner from each other. And I can remember so many memorable times with you, Cindy, and your sister and your mother and your aunt. I remember it was at your house where I watched the lunar landing in the summer of 1969. And then somehow lives diverge. And through the years, I would ask people, do you ever know what happened to Cindy McCain? And nobody seemed to know until one day you popped up on Facebook. And I just thought, there she is. And she's in Oregon. I don't even know exactly where you are, but it sounds like you're on the coast or something. And I thought,
Corvallis.
where?
Corvallis.
Oh, Corvallis. Oh, okay. And I thought, God, how perfect. And then to find out you're a poet. And I don't know if I've ever been to a poetry reading in my adult life, but let me tell you, your words are so, I don't know. I mean, when I've read poetry, it seemed very cerebral to me. I just haven't been able to get it, but I hear you speak these words and it goes straight to the heart.
Doug, I have to challenge the first thing that you said. You said you had never written a poem in your life. And I remember 12th grade English class, the sonnets. We all had to write them, you and me. Swear to God.
I wrote a sonnet. See, this is why it's great to keep in touch with your friends, because together we sort of have a complete memory. Well, wow, a sonnet. Was it good?
Oh, my heart. Of course it was.
Anyway, bless you. Thank you. And Christy, thank you for arranging this for all of us. We will stay in touch, Cindy.
You are so welcome. That's a great that's a great story. And Doug, this is recorded, so you have a sonnet somewhere out there in the world.
Who knew?
I think-
Also, I want to get these poetry books so that now that I've heard them, I can read. I assume you're going to, talk about how to do that.
Oh, before I read my last poem, I have a website, and it is nothing less than cynthiamccain.com. If you Google Cynthia McCain, you'll end up with Mrs. John McCain, but I'm in there too, and I got the website name, and there is how to get these off of there, as well as a few other things. So I hope you look there.
Yep, I just posted the link to your website in the chat, and also the link to Finishing Line Press, where you can find this chapbook. But if you go to her website, you'll be able to find a way to order her first chapbook as well.
So my last poem is pretty new. It's called Slow Poem. If slow were a song, a sloth would be a melody of old forests, where days and nights swing in languid tangos, where summer and winter finish each other's lines like old lovers. If slow were a prayer, a sloth would be a meditation, where up and down depend, where movement is the progression of patience. If slow were a dance, a sloth would be where a graceful arm completes its arc and delivers itself to a perfect rest.
That's wonderful, Cindy. Thank you so much. It's been just a joy to hear you read your poetry and to have the discussion with everybody. It's great to have you all here on a Sunday afternoon. This again is recorded, so I encourage you to go back and watch it again so you can enjoy Cindy's poetry one more time. Take a look at her website and her other chapbook as well. Share this video with friends if you know other people who'd be interested in poetry and interested in hearing some great poetry. And I hope that you will stop by hiddentimberbooks.com and check out some of the other events that we have coming up down the line. We have events through 2021 already in February and March. They will be up on our website soon. So this is just a series that keeps on running, and it's such a nice opportunity to bring people together after years of being apart and be able to see faces that are familiar and hear new works of poetry and other kinds of writing. So thank you so much again, Cindy, for being here.
Friends, sisters, sisters-in-law, daughters, husbands.
Thanks, Christy, also very, very wonderful.
Thank you.